The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Sorry we are a couple of minutes late. As always tends to happen with these things. We always have a couple of little technical problems just as we're starting up and getting going. So good morning, everybody. Oh, I don't know who, there's a lot of background noise there. I think if everybody except me can mute out, please, that would be great. Good morning, everybody. My name is David Rawle. I'm the Technical Director and CTO of Cybersecurity Partnerships. I'm just going to do a quick little bit of an intro just to set up this webinar. And then after that, I'm going to hand over to Luke from Checkpoint, who's going to just outline the concepts of Infinity and how it works. And then I'm just going to do a short technical demonstration just to show you how everything integrates together and the elements you can get and that are available to you with Infinity. So a quick bit of housekeeping, really. Key point here is, we like to keep these interactive. Obviously, we can't let you speak in during the webinar, but please do ask any questions throughout, and we will pick them up as we go. And then we will answer them at the end. As I said, agenda, quick introduction to us, and then what is Infinity, and a quick technical overview. Who are we? We are Cybersecurity Partnerships. We are the UK's leading independent security specialist. Although we're part of the Bytes Group, we are still an independent business in our own right. Most of our fellow businesses have been absorbed wholly into larger companies. That gives us two advantages. As still an independent security reseller, it still gives us the ability to drive on the products we believe in and work on the areas that we can focus on, but with the backing of a larger group, it also gives us the sound financial backing, etc., that maybe some smaller businesses don't have. We are now nearly 70 people. We have top-tier vendor relationships with all of our principal vendors, most notably Checkpoint, who we've been working with for nearly 20 years. We were the first Infinity partner worldwide, which gives us the ability to not only support all the different elements of Infinity, but also from Checkpoint's point of view, to deploy it as an integrated solution, which is a really nice fact and a really nice piece of recognition from them. Key differentiator for me in comparison to our competition is our support provision. Our support desk is run by Checkpoint CCSEs, CCD pros, etc., who spend at least 1 week a year in Israel working with the guys from Checkpoint and the R&D guys from Checkpoint. Gives them a unique insight into the product. It gives them the ability to not only, as some of our competition can, log tickets directly onto R&D, but get their ear, because they're actually out there in their faces. We have a team of 16 people within the Checkpoint team of the business, and every single one of them spends time in Tel Aviv, and every single one of them has personal contacts within Checkpoint in Israel, and that really marks us out as being very different to some of our key competition and fellow partners here in the UK. I think I've been pushing the message, certainly for me, from a reseller into Checkpoint, that we needed something like Infinity going back 5 or 6 years. Checkpoint launched the Infinity package of products 2 years ago. They've done a very good job of not only producing a licensing scheme, which we will talk about, but also an integrated product, which we'll talk about. I think Luke will talk much more about the licensing scheme, if you like, and the theory behind it. I will actually show you some of the product. But within Checkpoint, it's all very well if you have a vendor that is capable of providing you a license that enables you to consolidate multiple solutions down into one. But if those multiple solutions being consolidated down to one vendor that isn't actually any good, then it doesn't help you. With Checkpoint, we have some genuine best-of-breed products in a number of different areas, mobile security, next-gen firewall, and cloud security, which means it is actually worth deploying their products in multiple different areas. The fact that you can consume it in an all-in-one licensing model, to me, is simply an advantage and a more compelling reason to do that. But actually, it's worth deploying these solutions technically anyway, and now they've given us a licensing model that layers over the top. And that really, for me, is where the goalposts have changed slightly by Checkpoint, and how they've moved the goalposts on over the last 12 to 18 months. So without further ado, what I'm going to do Lucas, hand over to you. I will make you the presenter and hopefully everything will work. So we'll see how we get on.
Okay. Right, I think everyone should be able to see my screen now.
Yeah, we can see it and we can hear you.
Brilliant. So firstly, Dave, thank you very much for the introduction there. And firstly, thank you to Bytes for inviting me to kind of speak this morning. And thank you for everyone attending. So my name's Luke Goldsmith. I work for Checkpoint. I'm part of the strategic partnership team, and the Infinity architecture sits within that. So obviously you keep hearing this word infinity, and hopefully the goal of this talk this morning is that at the end of it, you'll have a better understanding of what that is. But high level, it's really how we're looking at consolidating a security architecture to prevent against the most sophisticated attacks that we're currently seeing. So if we jump into it, I guess to understand why Checkpoint also wanted to kind of develop this Infinity architecture, we just kind of have to kind of see what the current cybersecurity landscape looks like today. So as many of you are aware, with the kind of things that are evolving, things have changed. The business of yesterday is no longer the business today, right? So before, we could kind of wrap everything inside our network perimeter, keep it very safe, have lots of control, have lots of visibility on it. But as we're all aware, this is no longer the situation. So as businesses try to kind of stay competitive, as they go through digital transformation projects, that perimeter is essentially dissolved, and it kind of sits everywhere. So what we have now is much more remote workers. We have people work from home. They want the ability to kind of work from Starbucks. We're now moving applications into public cloud, whether that be AWS, Azure, and we're using SaaS applications. So this is great. It's certainly enabling businesses, but we have to kind of give consideration to how we're securing that. So as mentioned, all these enablers to the business are fantastic, but from a cyber criminal's point of view, all it's doing is increasing the amount of attack vectors that they can kind of enter from. So if we take phishing, for example, it still accounts for around 90% of all cyber attacks. So no longer have we got to be concerned with just the endpoint being attacked, but what are we doing in those cloud environments? What are we doing to protect your users' mobile phones? How are we protecting on shared SaaS applications, Box, Dropbox, OneDrive, whatever it might be? So again, we have to kind of start thinking, as that current perimeter is moved, what are we doing to look to protect that? The truth of the matter, really, when we did our own research and market research of other customers, is that most customers just aren't currently ready for what we would consider the kind of sophisticated attacks that we see. So if you look at this graph here, down on the bottom left, the first three columns, essentially endpoint, your network, firewall, antivirus, maybe some IPS. That's currently where we see around 90% of our customers. So they're deploying IPS, they're doing antivirus, they're doing firewalling. That's great, but if you think about it, all those things are relying on signature-based technology. How are we addressing the unknown attacks, the zero-day attacks? Because if you didn't have those technologies in place, you would have been lucky to get away with the attacks a couple of years ago, WannaCry, NotPetya, that didn't have that kind of signature-based. So what we're kind of seeing is that there's still a lot of work that we can kind of do in the network to kind of in order to prepare ourselves and protect against these next generation advanced attacks. So why are we having such an issue? Why are we having such an issue with readiness? Why isn't everyone just deploying the technology? Well, part of the thinking and what we're currently seeing is, to be honest, there's a lot of complexity in order to do that. It's easy to say, let's just do this, right? But in reality, it's not that easy. I'm not sure if anyone on the call attends a lot of exhibitions or if you go to things like InfoSec, but if you've just seen how that's exploded and grown over the years, this slide alone is just kind of highlighting the amount of security vendors that are currently playing in the space. lots of like startups starting often on a weekly basis. And that's great that, you know, they're trying to solve niche problems, but I guess for our customers and our prospects is that essentially this is adding a layer of complexity. You've got to go out to market, you've got to think, what do I do? How do I solve this problem with this technology? Oh, there's a new problem, I've got to deploy another technology. But maybe that's not just the best way of actually solving this issue. So if we look at the attack vectors, what we typically see in today's environment is we could categorize about 9 of them. So in order to combat them, we could potentially deploy around 8 different security technologies. That's great, right? But from a management point of view, really, if we're looking at that 9x8 problem, do we really want to be looking at 72 potential technologies? You know, managing them, configuring them, it's just a headache looking at those numbers. And that's just today's world, right? What if we start looking at tomorrow? You know, as we increase the attack vectors, we have to deploy more technology. You know, it's just not scalable in terms of like trying to solve this with point solutions. It's quite a scary number as you kind of keep looking what's going to be like in 3 years, 5 years, etc. And that's what often our customers do, right? So what happens is we try and grow our cybersecurity strategy in an organic way. So if we look at past, as you know, in the early days, we see a virus, right, let's deploy an antivirus. You know, as the web's exploding, right, how do we do URL filtering, and so on. But what we're doing is we're adding to that architecture in a very kind of best of breed point solution way, which a little while ago might have been the right solution, right? But however, as times have evolved, as our ways of changing has evolved, as that network is stretched beyond the traditional network perimeter, it's just not a scalable approach. And what we end up with is lots of different technologies, lots of different vendors, and they don't necessarily gel very well. So in terms of, again, how are these different technologies communicating with each other? How are we managing them? Again, when it comes to configuration, do you really want to log into one management system and then have to repeat that in another? The amount of man hours that takes, the amount of complexity it adds to your daily role, but also the potential security gaps that it leads. You know, if something's not talking to something else, how do you have visibility of that? If you do suffer a breach, how do you run a root cause analysis on that? So again, this kind of best of breed kind of solution, we're kind of seeing a reverse on that, and many of our customers are kind of starting to review how they address that issue. So on top of that, what we currently see is when we're speaking to, I guess, cybersecurity leadership at many of our customers, there's a few key issues that seem to kind of come up over and over again. And for those on the call, a few of these might actually stand out or ring true or be familiar. So what we typically see, again, is a major issue is the shortage of resources. So again, when we're kind of looking at your daily role, managing multiple technologies and multiple vendors, again, it's just kind of adding complexity and a lot of work to your daily tasks. Too many choices, where do you start? You know, the amount of time that you have to go out to market, look at different vendors, managing those vendors, you know, managing the different support that they offer. Complex environments, you know, again, typically we see the average organization is having more than 25 plus solutions, which again is just not only from a cost point of view, but again, a management point of view, just a logistical nightmare. And budget, of course, how do we improve the return on investment? We're always being asked by the business to do more with less. So taking everything into consideration, how are we going to address this issue? This is essentially why, obviously, Checkpoint came up with what we call Infinity Total Protection, which is both an architecture and, as Dave alluded to at the start, it's also a different way of how we license it, which I'll touch on today. So what's the vision of this? So I hope that most people on the webinar this morning know of Checkpoint. If you don't, we have been in the industry for over 25 years, you know, dedicated cybersecurity vendor. And what we're wanting to do is utilize all that experience to provide our customers with the most advanced threat prevention, covering those different vectors that we discussed at the start. So like how we protect the network, endpoint, cloud, and mobile. So if we want to visualize this, this is probably the best slide today, what we can kind of look at and how this kind of all works together. So if we start down in the bottom right in the network area, I guess this is where most people on the call today will know Checkpoint, right? This is our kind of bread and butter. This is our firewall, our security gateways, whether they sit in your headquarters, in your branch, in your data center. And on those appliances, it can be either physical tin hardware or it can be software deployed. But no matter what, the technology remains the same across it. So we can kind of deploy our antivirus, our firewalling, IPS, our anti-bot, and then of course we've got our next generation securities, which we call Sandblast, which is dealing with the zero-day threats. So top right, again, what we're trying to do here is address the cloud strategy of many of our customers. What we often see is that most people have made that transition to the cloud, if not, partway there, they're starting to dip the toes in, and that can be in two formats. It can be either in public cloud in terms of AWS or Azure, or in our own private cloud. And of course, we're also trying to address on the software as a service applications. So how are we addressing the explosion of adoption of Office 365 and putting a security wrap around that, or everyday applications that organizations are using like Slack or Salesforce. If we move over to the top left, so mobile, I think this is often an underrated kind of piece where we're not necessarily putting that much focus on, but we're starting to need to. So many of our customers are deploying an MDM or mobile device management solution, but they're often kind of neglecting the fact that we need to kind of put a security wrap around that. So what we're doing is adding that security, again, that Sandblast, zero-day technology, anti-malware onto the mobile device to protect them against rogue networks, rogue Wi-Fi networks. And we can also provide, in some instances, of capture workspace, so containerization on those phones. And of course, we can't forget the classic endpoint. So again, it's often a great layer of defense. So we need to have top-notch security there, not just current signature-based antivirus, but again, we need to be looking at that next generation protection. So again, that zero-day, how do we deal with ransomware? And most importantly, how do we look at forensics? So if we do suffer a breach, how can we see what else is touched in the network, provide those reports to management? So if we look at those four aspects individually, network, cloud, mobile, endpoint, they're the areas that we're trying to kind of cover like 90% of a customer's security requirements with. Managing those separately from a best-of-breed solution, again, as I alluded to earlier, can be a logistical nightmare. The benefit of Checkpoint, if we look down to the center at the bottom, is our R80, Consolidated Security Management. This is the kind of like the powerhouse that's kind of gelling all this together. It's mentioned by Gartner, their words, not ours, as the gold standard of management. And hopefully that you on the call that have experience with Checkpoint will realize that. And essentially what we're providing there is a unified way to kind of manage and configure all these different elements. And having the visibility of that all in one place provides you great benefits, not only in terms of return on investment, but also the man hours and the management and reducing the complexity to do all of that. And of course, what we have here is our Threat Cloud. So for those not familiar with Threat Cloud, it's the largest cybersecurity repository in the world. As I said earlier, we've been around in the industry a very long time, which means we've built up a very large customer base over that time. We have hundreds of thousands of gateways across the globe. And what we're doing with that is we're feeding information into this Threat Cloud. And no matter what attack vector it comes in, basically that's providing the intelligence across all of them to kind of keep you protected. So we could see attack in someone's network in Japan, that's going to automatically update Threat Cloud and protect our EMEA customers. It could come in via the cloud, mobile, endpoint, it doesn't matter. And then of course we have manual input from our own research team in Israel. So some great aspects there, and I hope that gives you a good visualization of kind of what we're trying to achieve with the architecture and the amount of technologies that we can consolidate down into this one image. So I just wanted to touch on the principles of that architecture as well. So really at the heart of everything that Checkpoint do, or it's built into our DNA, is threat prevention. And there's a key difference, as I'm not sure many of you will agree, between threat prevention and threat detection. we don't want our customers to be day zero attacked. So what we do is we want to protect you from those attacks ever even going inside of the network. The shared threat intelligence, of course, that's powered by Threat Cloud, what we touched on, and consolidated management. That's the key here, right? It's the ability to manage all those aspects from one place and have visibility in one place, all your logs going into one area. So I'll just very lightly touch on the licensing model. So the key differentiator here, now I don't think we know anyone else that's doing this in the market at the minute, is what we're doing is we're giving you the ability to consume everything in that previous slide that I showed you on the architecture as and when you want on a cost of a per user per year subscription basis. And what that gives you access to is essentially everything in Checkpoint's catalog. That is that advanced threat prevention and zero-day protection. And that's covering everything from physical gateways to software deployed gateways to everything in the cloud. It's covering all your user-based protection, which would be Endpoint, SaaS, and mobile. And of course, adding on our 24-hour premium support. So we are now giving our customers the ability to either do that as CapEx or OpEx, whatever works for you. But the benefit of that is that it gives you a predictable spending cost model over the next 3 to 5 years, whatever it might be. Because as part of that model, what we do is we give you an allowance for that hardware and those cloud gateways. So you can kind of just draw upon that as and when you need that as a business. And the benefit that brings is that you might be a customer that is very acquisition based. So as you grow, you can kind of just draw down on more of that to enable new branch offices opening, or that you just having acquire more employees, whatever it might be. Is that the main reason that a lot of customers are kind of starting to explore this model? It gives them a lot of flexibility of what they're currently doing today, whether that be hardware on premise and they're making that shift to the cloud. We just give the flexibility to kind of work with you to make that transition at a predictable cost model. So what have we learned from success? So firstly, partnership. So I'm hoping Bytes, who are obviously on the call today, can attest to this. So it's kind of working in relation with Bytes, who are key strategic partners to us, ourselves, and of course you as a customer, to truly understand what your security requirements are and how we can kind of build and mold that Infinity model to work best for you. In terms of the best security, again, I have to kind of reference the point of how long Checkpoint have been in the industry to kind of focus on that prevention strategy and to give you the visibility, control, and automation to kind of make your day-to-day role a lot easier. And the only way to do that is that holistic approach. We have to start looking at consolidated architecture. The way of that best-of-breed point solution, that's just not the way to move forward. As we saw earlier in terms of the amount of attack vectors, it's just not a scalable way. And of course, it's all inclusive in terms of our kind of commercial and licensing model. We want to give you the ability to kind of consume things as and when you need them as a business, only using what you need. So really, again, when we're kind of looking at the value we're giving is that prevention. Don't be that patient zero. Threat intelligence and automation. Feel that you're safe in our hands in terms of having the best cyber security threat repository, powering intelligence across all those different vectors, and giving you the visibility across it all. And again, when we're looking at TCO, typically what we see with a lot of our customers where we're working on Infinity projects is about a 20% reduction in terms of the security spend by going down that consolidated architecture. But another benefit is that we see about a 50% reduction in terms of man hours, in terms of managing all those capabilities as well. And the great thing for you would be that that gives you the ability to work on projects that can drive your business forward, not just managing the day-to-day policies and configurations. So just to kind of summarize here, that was a very high level discussion and just kind of give you a taste of what we're trying to achieve with Infinity and going down that consolidated architecture approach. So what we're kind of saying is, if you remember that slide towards the start, we want to help you transition from just using the firewalling, the AV, the IPS, and those signature-based technologies, more to the capabilities of zero-day, protecting you against those advanced threats we see today, but also those attacks that we're of course going to come tomorrow. And we see this as consolidation route. We need to kind of plug those security gaps, make it easier for you to manage, and make it harder for the cybersecurity criminals to get in. And the only way we're going to do this is putting you in prevention mode. So that's me for today. And I'm hoping Dave now is going to show you what that Infinity actually looks like in real terms, like how we can kind of piece that together and actually put it into kind of practical capabilities. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Luke. Yes, I will try to. We will see how we get on. This isn't going to be the biggest technical demo that you guys, any of you who've seen me do a demo before, etc., will have seen, but hopefully it will be useful and it will be informative. So I'm just making sure all of my tabs are working. It's always part of the fun. You tee it all up before the seminar, and then while you're sat there on the seminar watching somebody else speak, everything decides to log out. So I'm just trying to log everything back in, but I'm sure that will all be fine in a second. So what I'm just going to walk through, there are a number of key elements that Luke talked about. I'm just going to walk through those and walk through how Checkpoint deals with that stuff and what it does, etc. Because there is some very, very cool functionality within Checkpoint now. And a lot of that functionality, a lot of our customers, to be fair, don't actually know just how broad Checkpoint's reach in terms of that functionality is. So let's walk through that and let's start to look at it. So the first thing Luke mentioned is Checkpoint's management console. Checkpoint's management console for a long time has been recognized as being pretty class leading. You know, the competition keeps trying to catch up. Checkpoint keep moving the moving the goalpost a little bit. We have here a fairly simple management setup. This is actually live data from our office. This is our technical network firewalls. You can see we've got a smart center server, we've got a smart event box, and we've got a 5000 series appliance. This appliance has every single blade, I think, bar one. We were talking about this yesterday. We haven't got content awareness turned on at the moment on it, but we do have HTTPS inspection turned on it. We have gone through the pain, and our technical team have sworn at us a lot, but we have deployed HTTPS inspection in production, and we are ready to do that for our customers. So we have that turned on, and that gives us a slightly different viewpoint on what's happening on our network. In terms of the security policies, for any of you who haven't seen it, this is a basic Checkpoint security policy, and it is basic, but it's a really good example of the kind of stuff we can do with this. You know, we have nice compartmentalized areas in terms of the way we've laid the rule base out, and we also have some sub areas and some inline layers here. So what we can do is we can tee in to these and effectively come back out of the rule base in different directions. So rather than the rule base just organically flowing top to bottom, we have the ability at different breaks to effectively come out of the rule base in a different direction. So here, rule 11, this is our web browsing section. And in here, we are blocking stuff that we don't want our laptops and users to access, whether deliberately or more likely accidentally. This is where we're allowing Microsoft stuff. This is dependent, this is important for SSL. You do need to do some permitting of this kind of stuff. And if we click in here, we can see that traffic flowing through, and we can see the different stuff happening. We can also see blocks, etc. in here. The important thing about this is that this data, he says, because that was working literally 2 minutes ago, this data is effectively live data, and this policy is built such that I've integrated all the blocking, URL filtering, categorization, that kind of stuff alongside the general firewall policy, which a lot of our Checkpoint customers don't seem to know that they can do. And the other nice thing about it is I can reuse this layer. So this layer is a layer called restricted web browsing. This is this layer, and this layer contains firewall rules and applications and URL filtering rules. I can tick this box if I want and reuse this layer for any other place. So if I want to, I can create different blocks of rules for different offices using dynamic objects, and I can reuse this layer. And if I modify this layer, it updates it all the offices, so I don't have to visit the rule base for every office. So it's just this kind of functionality that is being brought together, and it's making the product much simpler. So the key element of that is visibility. We have here the good old log viewer, which we've got ticking away. But on top of that, we also have the Smart Center server, the Smart Event type information. So I have a general overview here, what's been going on in the network. But I also have the ability to go in, and this is effectively being used as our web filter and our web proxy. So I can go into here and I can look at the amount of data different people are transferring, and look at the activity timelines and all that kind of stuff. So this is good. This is useful information, enables us to see the most used things on our network in the last 7 days, which, to be honest, I'm quite happy that it's LastPass, Outlook, Teams, Google Ads doesn't surprise me. You know, this is all stuff we would expect to see. Checkpoint have got a nice Infinity dashboard now, which just shows us kind of what all the different products are doing. This is nice. I like this, sources of network attacks, where we're getting different attacks from, what the metrics are, anything that's going on the network. It's just a nice, simple viewpoint. But again, what a lot of people don't know you can do with Checkpoint, this makes your lives very easy as administrators, is I can now hop across and I can go into a web view of this data. So I can just hop across into this and I can get a web view of this data and I can see exactly what's going on. He says, live demos, huh? Live demos, let's try that again. I can log into here and I can see exactly what's going on through a web view, and you'll notice that these are literally exactly the same views. Because the Smart Console is now effectively web driven at the back end, we now have the ability to go in and get the same views from this angle, and this makes your life incredibly easy in terms of remote management, distribution, etc., etc. We can view all of this information via a web portal. So I think most people know Checkpoint for being a next generation firewall provider. We've got this viewpoint, we've got all of this data here. We can use this as a true next generation firewall. We've got application control, URL filtering, all of these toys. I mean, the list of blades is long. You know, if I go back to here, you know, this is all the stuff we've got on. We've got threat emulation turned on, where any piece of code that comes down, any executable piece of code is sent off to Checkpoint, is executed in the sandbox. Because we've got HTTPS inspection turned on this firewall, it's not just stuff that's in the clear, it's any code that comes down through the SSL channel. We also have threat extraction turned on. That means if I download a document, PDF, something like that, it will recreate that and give me the ability to download it and make sure it is clean and it has no malicious code in it. So effectively, threat extraction would take, say, a Word document. If I chose, you don't have to do it this way, but click on that Word document, it will be downloaded by the appliance, sent off to Checkpoint for scanning. I get a whole page saying this has been sent for scanning. Do you wish to receive the original file? Do you wish to get a clean file, etc.? So we've got some really nice technology in here to do some interesting stuff, but that isn't the only thing that Checkpoint does, as Luke's already said. We also have Blas Mobile. Now, being brutally honest, and those of you that know me will know I always will be brutally honest, at the moment, these two web views are not consolidated. It is coming in the next 6 to 12 months. But I have here Blas Mobile, and I have here the ability to track what's happening with mobile devices. We're just in the process of moving to a new managed environment provided by Microsoft Intune. I'm not sure how many of you use that. And so these phones are appearing in a new portal that's being managed by Intune. That's why there's not very many phones in here yet, but this is live data. These are some of our technical guys' mobile phones, and it's all green. Everything's all compliant. It's all nice. But you'll notice, and this was a phone we provisioned yesterday, and I did leave it on this OS version deliberately. This phone here is running 12.4.1. Now, obviously, I have Intune, so I can pick up there's a failure here from a compliancy point of view. But just to show you how this works, if I were to go into the Blas Mobile policy and say, actually, I'm not happy about 12.4, I want 13.1 on everything, and save that, instantly, when I go back to my events and alerts, I will see a non-compliant OS version at the top. If I go back to my dashboard, I will see a wedge telling me there is a problem and I've got an issue, which I can click in and it will take me to that. And I can see exactly what's going on with it. But also, if I hit refresh on the Intune view, haha, live demos. That's worked every time I've tested it today. I'll give it a second and come back. It probably just needs to update. But this phone here at the bottom will go non-compliant relatively quickly. So we'll have a look at that in a minute. I can also, as part of how this works, if I want, I can click across. It's all links together. I can click into here and see the specifics of this error and what's going on. So this is a non-compliant OS version. I can go into here, I can click on the phone, and it will take me across to the view in Azure and look at the devices in here. And that phone is now not compliant. Okay, so that's showing how all of that wires up. Now, if we just go into the policy a second on this, and this is not a demo on any particular product, this is just showing you the level of stuff. But you can see the kind of stuff we've got under general risk for iOS, certificate changes, jailbreaking, OS versions. We've also obviously got all the Android stuff in here. We can go in and do non-market apps, etc., suspicious app, dangerous app, redirection tools, all this kind of stuff. On-device network protection. Checkpoint have got this, to be said, very, very good. This is effectively offloading URL filtering, phishing sites, all that kind of stuff onto the device itself, so your device is protected. We have this turned on. I've got it set so any device that disables it, which you can, because I've said it can be disabled, but if they disable it, it will show an alert, it will go into here, and it will show as non-compliant. Everybody gets an email. This kind of protection is very, very important. Mobile devices are being attacked more and more and more. It's kind of like a triangle that's working the wrong way round. When on PCs, laptops, 20 years ago with, Cornucova, I love you, all that kind of stuff, we were seeing very low technology, mass virus infection, very big infections, but very low technology to achieve it. And that slowly, the technology has increased. They become more targeted. And then almost when we get to the top now, we've got massively high technology infections, but we're also seeing mass infections with things like NotPetya and things like that. And it's kind of almost like an hourglass. We pinched with targeted and high technology with not that many infections happening. And then with ransomware, NotPetya, all that kind of stuff, it's exploded out again. With mobile, we've really started off a very narrow, highly targeted infections. But 0 days on iPhones are now down into the $200,000 to $250,000 range if you just want to go and buy one. With a 0 day for iOS or iPad OS, you can simply with a drive-by in Mobile Safari or in Messages, you can infect these devices, and you can capture finance information, you can capture screen taps, we can intercept and authorize payments. It is a really big problem. So mobile protection is all the more important. However, for some reason, businesses don't seem to be able to get the budget for standalone solutions. We have what Microsoft acknowledged as one of the two most effective and most activated mobile endpoint protection systems available as part of the Infinity bundle. So it is very, very important to have. I'm just going to set that to 12.4. That will immediately knock out this to make it all go green. And maybe, just maybe, if I click over here and click back onto this device, it might have already gone green, but it might still be red. But let's see. Still red at the moment, but as you saw before, it changed within a couple of minutes. The other section we have within Inactivity, as well as all of the different hardware appliances, and those who know Checkpoint as Luke's mentioned, there's a whole range of hardware appliances from small offices all the way up to large enterprise. We have the Maestro chassis, which enable us to scale up to 100 terabits of traffic. I mean, massive, massive amounts of traffic with 40 to 50 box clusters, should you need such a thing. We also have the ability to deploy next-gen firewalls into the cloud. We have the ability to manage those next-gen firewalls from this interface. We can automatically create rules based on zones in Azure and all that kind of stuff. But we also have the CloudGuard elements. And the one I've got here is CloudGuard SaaS. Now, CloudGuard SaaS for me is a real no-brainer to have as part of Infinity, it says as it goes dark on me again. Let's just hit refresh on that. CloudGuard SaaS is the ability to hook into your Exchange Online, hook into your OneDrive, hook into your SharePoint, and go in and threat emulate, AV scan, and et cetera, all of those toys, all of the files that are stored in those repositories. It has some content awareness elements into it for DLP, for credit card numbers, that kind of stuff. And we have the ability to go in to these systems and detect what end users have put into them and whether there is any threats. Now, this serves two purposes. One, if an end user has an encrypted file, if an end user has a malicious file and it comes into their laptop, any business that is adopting OneDrive en masse or SharePoint or Teams, because these things are all glued together with SharePoint at the back end, are probably getting the laptops to store their desktop documents, etc. folders in OneDrive. That means as soon as it comes down from the web onto that machine, it'll probably drop into one of those if they've saved it. And it will then instantly go up into the cloud. It will instantly be scanned here. Before it can be shared with any other source or any other repository, it will be picked up as malicious. Now, funnily enough, we've got two here. These are quite old because this is when we adopted OneDrive for our technical people. But nonetheless, you know, a Checkpoint AV detected that there was a virus in their practice lab. That doesn't surprise me. But this one's a little bit more interesting. This is Sandblast detecting malware in a binary. Now I can click into that. And this is all fundamentally automated. There's no agent on the laptops that's producing this. And I can go and view a full report of what this did. Now, this, as it happens, maybe it's a bad example, but effectively it's a false positive, but it's still interesting to see that a user is deploying an SMTP agent here. And actually, it does exactly what you would expect it to do as an SMTP agent. It span up, it used the cryptographic libraries, it spawned its own processes, and it started listening and sending network connections, all of which are pretty nasty, to be honest, if it was in isolation. But as it happens in this instance, it's fine. We even get the video available for us here. And this is a purely online tool. Any of you, even if you're not Checkpoint customers at all, could purchase this and just hook this into your OneDrive and SharePoint, and you would get all of these toys as part of it. This is quite cool. I quite like this. The last part of the product that I really want to mention is the Endpoint product. Within Endpoint, we have forensics, anti-ransomware. We have effectively these agents here, all of this stuff running on the laptops as well. Now, if you start to think about it, we have a next-gen firewall on the laptops, we have anti-ransomware, we have forensics, shall we say, UK government-funded health thing. I won't use a word beginning with S because that really would mean what I say, but when NotPetya arrived, pretty much all of the different authorities, you could see where NotPetya stopped because it was where they were running the Checkpoint endpoint agent, because it stopped the ransomware and it stopped the attack in its tracks because, as Luke mentioned earlier, it is not signature-based. It's looking for malicious behavior. And in the anti-ransomware, it has the ability to roll the machines back and roll the documents back. And when you start to layer that in with the perimeter firewall, and your Azure or AWS or whatever firewalls, and in fact, those are next-gen firewalls with IPS and with URL filtering, application control, and all of those kind of stuff, content awareness. The fact that we can do threat emulation, we can do threat extraction, we can do that either on an endpoint, we can do that in the cloud, as you can see in this screen here. We can do that in the cloud, or we can do it on premise on the firewalls. We've got a compelling technology suite that can very much give you guys the ability to feel a lot safer about what's going on your network, particularly once you get SSL enabled. In Blas Mobile, we can also, if I go into the policy, we can also enable SSL inspection. Like I said, this is a relatively new deployment, but I haven't turned it on yet. But just to show you where it goes in the on-device network protection, I can actually do SSL inspection of this traffic. The reason we haven't turned this on yet is from a testing point of view, if I'm being honest with everybody, mobile devices pose a real unique challenge with SSL inspection because Apple, Google, etc. use a piece of methodology called SSL pinning, which means they're not just doing SSL inspection, the device expects the certificate to be a particular certificate, and if it isn't, it won't allow the connection. They do this to stop firmware intercepts, to stop people reverse engineering the code. It poses us a problem to get at that code and see what it's doing, but it's something the industry is working on. And you know, we've got all of these toys and all this stuff is here and all of this stuff works and all of this stuff is available to you for a simple fee that is per user per year for your organization. What we as Bytes do is we also roll into that fee all the professional services you could need to deploy all of these tools in one hit. And we also roll in all of our support services, which I mentioned up front, all of the guys who uniquely really within the UK are able to support every single one of these products. They genuinely can support Blas Mobile, they can support Endpoint, they can support the firewalls, they can support cloud. We have got engineers out there doing provisioning scripts in Azure and AWS and redeploys, you know, on a weekly basis of the cloud firewalling elements. So we are not only selling this, but actually touching it and using it every day, which gives us a very strong proposition, I think. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you guys and just give you a feel from a technical point of view. We have some other stuff in here which I have not configured yet. You know, we only get so much time. We have the ability to detect if corporate credentials are being reused to stop phishing. We have CloudGuard Connect, which gives us the ability to link remote sites up through Checkpoint's cloud service for frontline screening and filtering with threat emulation, all that kind of stuff. You know, we can do Endpoint with cloud management. We've got so many things as part of Infinity. We also have Dome 9, which is Checkpoint's threat posture and analytics and policy tool for AWS and Azure. You know, and all this can be consumed under the same model. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. I'm just going to have a quick look and see if we have got any questions from anybody while we were here. And it actually isn't looking like we have any, which is unusual. So guys, if you do have any questions, now is very much the time to ask them, because we are going to sign off in a minute. Luke, is there anything else you just wanted to mention quickly before we sign off, just to give the guys a chance to ask any questions if they want to?
No, from my point, I know we generally get some questions, especially around the licensing point of view, because I know I kind of skipped over that quite quickly. So yeah, if anyone does want to touch on that or me to explain it a little bit more, yeah, please do ask. But if not today, then yeah, feel free to reach out to Bytes, and I'm sure we can arrange to have a bit more in-depth conversation around that.
Yeah, I think one thing that's worth clarifying on the licensing point of view is that obviously with Infinity, you do get, and correct me if I'm wrong here on this, Luke, you do get obviously a pool of money to spend, which can be spent on either hardware or different elements. The core software components are basically provided for the number of users you have, aren't they? So if you've got 1,000 users and you buy 1,000 users of Infinity, you get 1,000 users of Endpoint, you get 1,000 users of Blas Mobile, you get 1,000 users of all of that kind of stuff. But we can manipulate that budget to include a lot of cloud firewalls and fewer hardware firewalls, or Dome 9 and less that, or whatever the end user wants, can't we, to make the licensing model work for them and make it work most effectively for their business, can't we?
Yeah, yes, most certainly. And again, I think that's the beauty of that kind of licensing model, is that it ends up being quite bespoke. So just to kind of give you an idea of what it might look like. So typically what we do is, as Dave said, is from the user count point of view, is on those user-based licenses like Endpoint or mobile or SaaS, we just give you, for example, 1,000 licenses. When it comes to deploying hardware or any kind of cloud technology, what we do is we give you a little bucket of money. So view this as like your own personal little piggy bank with Checkpoint. And it's, so for example, if I just chuck a big number out there, for example, like $1 million, let's say your contract was $1 million, essentially what that would give you as standard terms would be like a 50% allowance towards hardware and a 50% allowance towards cloud products. So 500K for each. And then you can kind of spend that as and when you want over the period of your contract. And again, the beauty of the flexibility of that is that you know you've got that much money sitting there for the next 3 to 5 years, whatever it might be. You know you're going to spend X amount today, but you've also got allowance in there to enable your organization to grow, whether that be organically or through acquisition or whatever it might be. And a lot of our customers love that kind of flexibility and the ability to just consume that as and when they like. But getting back to kind of bespoke thing, those numbers I kind of said they're 50-50, that's our standard terms. But of course, we will work with organizations where you might be more heavily hardware invested, or you might have a bigger cloud strategy, so you want more allowance towards that. So we'll work very closely with yourselves and Bytes to kind of tailor any kind of licensing aspect to ensure that it does actually meet your needs.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very, very flexible to make sure that it works best for the organization. Okay, well, look, Emma, I haven't had any other stuff through, so at this point we'll wrap up with this, I think. Luke, thank you very much for your time. Guys out there, thank you very much for signing in and watching along today. If any of you have any questions, please do come back to Shona or Michael, who will have sent you the invites. We can link you up to your account manager, and if you know who your account manager is, obviously come back to them directly. And thank you very much for your time, everybody. It's been great to have you all along today, and hope to see you all soon at one of our events. We will be at IP Expo this week, or DX Expo, or whatever they've decided to call it. It's very confusing. But we will be at IP Expo this week if any of you want to come along and meet any of us face-to-face over at the Excel. So hopefully see you all soon. Thank you.